Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so excited to have my guest today, Sonja Dynamo Price. Sonja has 15 plus years of experience in career and leadership consulting. She has worked with a wide range of clients, including Amazon, AT&T, Facebook, Google, HBO, Microsoft, Nordstrom, Starbucks, T-Mobile, and numerous other organizations. She has a master's degree in leadership and organizational development and is a certified career and executive coach. She trained with Al Gore to become a climate reality leader and is actively engaged with the Seattle Board of Conscious Capitalism. Sonja is passionate about empowering professionals to accelerate their career success, to become financially free, and to make a positive impact around the world. In her downtime, she enjoys skiing, playing piano, and geeking out over strategy board games. Please join me in welcoming Sonja Price. Welcome, Sonja.
Hey, Tammy. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
It's great to have you. So, on Work from the Inside Out, we like to talk about all the transitions and twists and turns that many of us have taken in our careers. And we want to start at the beginning. So take us back to some of your earlier days and how those may or may not have been formative in terms of where you are today.
All right. Well, when I was a young kid, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up. However, I had this vision of myself as being this very strong, competent businesswoman. So I had this very, characteristic image or vision of myself wearing a skirt suit and carrying a briefcase and wearing high heels. And, who knows where I got that image from, probably just society and whatnot. But I had no clue, what did that actually mean to be a businesswoman? And as I grew up and I became more acquainted and familiar with the various different careers, it took a while. It was a journey. It was a journey to identify exactly what I wanted to do and exactly what that would look like. And I tried a number of different things along the way. And if I'm really honest about it, I think our careers are continuous evolutionary processes. So, I'm doing what I'm doing right now, but I'm a pretty unique and dynamic person. So it will probably continue to evolve over time.
Well, I like that spirit. I think a lot of us sometimes get trapped in an idea of what we're supposed to be doing or how it's supposed to go. So it sounds like you're open to a variety of possibilities, which is a good way to also help guide other people. But I know that when we talked earlier, because as my audience knows, I do often have a pre-interview conversation. I remember you telling me that even as young as 6 years old, you envisioned yourself in a business suit or kind of a business person, which I thought was really fun. And that's a pretty young age to imagine yourself with a briefcase, but
and people don't even really carry briefcases anymore. So,
but back then they did. I don't know.
Right.
But I thought that was kind of a funny image. A little kid imagining themselves with a briefcase. But at the same time, you had this image of yourself as a professional and having a career of some kind, right? Mm-hmm. And you grew up in the Seattle area. Is that correct?
Actually, I grew up in Colorado, primarily in Colorado, but my family moved around a little bit. So I've actually lived in a couple different places in the U.S., Colorado, California, Missouri, and Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
And then I went to college in New Mexico and then landed in Seattle.
I see. Okay. So you had an eclectic growing up period, living in various parts of the country, which is kind of an interesting opportunity to get to know different cultures and different areas. Mm-hmm. And so once you went off to college, I know that also was part of your journey, right?
Yeah. Yes. As I mentioned earlier, I really did not know exactly what I wanted to do. And when I got to college, I kind of knew that I was supposed to go to college and it would be a good idea to get a college degree, but I didn't have a lot of guidance on like, hey, maybe you should think about majoring in this, or why don't you take these kinds of assessments to see what would be a good fit for your personality style? Or, I didn't have any of that kind of guidance. And so when I first went to college, I didn't actually choose a major, but in the initial early days, I did not choose a major, but I tried a whole bunch of different things. And so I liked psychology, like kind of the various different phases that I went through. First, it was like psychology. Then it was music management, because I started college in Tennessee, and music is a really big deal there, not just country music, but all kinds of music.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, music management, that would be really fun. Then I got really interested in architecture and photography. And then when I was in college, that was when the digital revolution really happened. And so I was interested in photography. And initially, I was spending hours and hours in the darkroom, old school, developing photographs, which was really, really, really fun, but it took a lot of time and effort. And then Photoshop was like slowly becoming available to the common individual. At first it was this like, Hollywood industry kind of type thing.
Yeah.
And same thing with video editing tools. And so I was really interested in photography, and then I got interested in video, and I started creating mini documentaries. And, maybe that kind of touched in on some of my interest in psychology, because I was really curious about people and team dynamics and changes in technology. And, like things have, like, technology has progressed rapidly during all of our life. Like, if we are alive today, technology has shifted dramatically throughout the course of our lifetime. And it was really a big, big deal when I was in college. And so I actually started to create a documentary called Tracking Technology, a nostalgic look at our past and a preparation for the future. And I was really interested in how computers and cell phones were changing the way that we live our lives and the way that we actually relate to one another. So I got really interested in documentary filmmaking, and I thought I was pretty good at it. But then when I actually started thinking about pursuing a career in it, I was like, oh, hey, wait a second. How am I going to make any money at all? And so I got about 3/4 of the way through my college education.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't even know what I really want to do with my life, or I knew what I wanted to do, but I also needed to make sure that I could make money and live and survive and thrive. And so what I decided to do was to take a break from school. And I suppose you could kind of call it a gap year, but it was like a professional gap year. And so I decided I would get a professional job. I was like, I just need to get some professional experience, and I want to see what's out there. What's it like? And I ended up landing this entry-level job with a startup company here in Seattle, where I live now. And that was probably one of the best opportunities and the best experiences that I could have created for myself, because not only did it give me experience working in the professional world, but I had a really wonderful mentor. The founder of the organization was a really wonderful mentor to me. And that job just put my career on the map. And I got a lot of experience, and I learned more about, what do I want to do, and what's the variety of different professions out there, and I started to pay attention to how much does each profession make, and why might I want to go in one direction versus another direction. And, even during that time frame when I was there, I was still considering a bunch of career options, but the founder of the organization was a really wonderful mentor to me. And so from time to time, I would say to him, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And he would, in a very kind and polite way, be like, that's interesting, Sonja. Why would you want to do that? So he actually really, and I think he would have been supportive of me no matter what direction I wanted to go in. But he would say things to me like, Sonja, you're a really dynamic individual. If you go down that pathway, I think you'll be really bored. And the things I was curious about and interested in was like pharmacy or, becoming a radiology technician or something like that. And he's totally right. Like I would have been bored to tears. And I probably would have capped out on my income. And then I would have just put a bunch of time into a new career path and then gone back to the drawing board to revisit it all over again. So he was really instrumental in giving me a lot of opportunity to, build up my professional experience, but also giving me mentorship and guidance in, what some future opportunities could be for me and where I might want to grow my career.
Wow. What I think about, you were still probably a pretty young person. Not that you're not an old person now.
No, early 20s at that time, not now, but
you were young, starting out, and how insightful of you to have, explored, a bunch of different disciplines already in school. And then to give yourself, I love the way you called it a professional break. Mm-hmm. And you found this job and this mentor and really allowed yourself to kind of swing wide and both immerse yourself in this startup company, but also had the opportunity to have these kind of open-ended conversations about just all these other professions and things, and allowed yourself to not get kind of trapped in one line of thinking and really explore a lot of different possibilities. And it sounds like you really took some time to just think openly about what would my next move be, or what kind of pathway might I want to start looking down. Mm-hmm. I just think that was, like you said, it's probably one of the best things you've ever done. And I almost wish that most young people would do that, because I think that they try too hard to pigeonhole themselves into something. And I think a lot of parents push their kids into that too. Mm-hmm. I think because everybody's looking for that security, right? And I think you were as well. You were looking for that, for how can I make a living and all of those things, right? And how can I grow? But I like the kind of natural curiosity you brought to that, and the real zest for learning that you put into that. And I'm saying these things with great emphasis because I want to encourage my audience to think about things that way. And I don't think it should even be limited to people in their 20s.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree with you there. And I really appreciate you saying that and acknowledging that, because I think at that time in my life, I just thought that I was lost and confused. And I was, quite honestly, but I had a lot of fun doing it. And, I kind of feel like maybe I should receive a little bit of an award or get some special recognition or something, because it took me 6 years and 7 different colleges to finish my degree, but I found a way to make it work for me. So as I mentioned before, I started in Tennessee, and then I moved to New Mexico, and then I moved to Seattle. And I just found a way to, I took night classes to get general requirements out of the way, but I always made sure that they transferred back to the overall degree. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I took extra classes or credits that didn't relate to any kind of degree at all. And I think sometimes we keep ourselves too strictly aligned with specific guidelines. And I feel like, me having that time and exploration in my life, which has continued on forward from there, but especially in college, I used to love when the college catalog would come out, and I would just pour through all the pages, and I would be like, oh my gosh, African dance, that's a cool class. Like, I'll take that. Right. And the credit the credits didn't mean anything, but I took that class. So I was very interested in history. So I took the history of the American frontier, or the history of modern medicine, or the history of photography. and just thinking about, you can learn a lot through art history and how that has shaped our culture and our society today. And so I think a lot of those things have really informed me to be who I am. And, even now, I think it's fun to sign up for a class at a community college or take a Coursera class or a Udemy class or go on YouTube, right? University of YouTube, just go on there and click away and see what interests you.
Yeah.
And let your curiosity take you. And I think in maybe even approaching things in kind of that nonlinear fashion of like, not every single thing that you do has to relate to a larger goal, but recognizing that your curiosity will lead you in the direction that you ultimately want to go. And you'll be much more grounded and more intuitively aligned with it as well, because you've kind of scanned everything that's out there. And then you're gathering different data points and bringing that into your own awareness in a way that it's much more concrete and more aligned and more grounded.
Yeah, I love what you just said, and I'm probably going to pull that out of the recording and use that as part of the what I use in social media to promote this episode, actually, cool. because I think what you're saying is so important about, you don't have to choose something ahead of time to decide that's where you're headed. Sometimes you need to take a class or, explore something. It might turn into something big for you, or it might just be a learning experience that you move on from. And when you mentioned, Coursera or, YouTube University, there's so many options available to us these days to get some really solid and, outstanding education for low or no cost. It doesn't all have to add up to high tuition rates for us to get some of the information we need. And I'm constantly trying to remind people of that. I mean, of course, if you want a degree in something, there's a good likelihood you're going to have to spend some good money for that. But I think if you're trying to just build your knowledge or build some skills, there's lots and lots of ways to get those things without having to take out a second mortgage on your house.
Absolutely. And even for the degree, there's way more available opportunities today than there ever has been before.
Yes.
So there's so many opportunities out there that you can get an online accredited degree. In fact, I'm hearing really good things about Western Governors University.
Oh, okay.
Which is a group of governors came together to create a university, and you can actually get financial aid to pursue a degree there.
We'll put it in the show notes.
And it's a very affordable degree as well. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for mentioning that.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and I just want to also acknowledge that, when you're a 20-something and you're aiming, you have your whole life in front of you and you're aiming for something, I can imagine that you and we're both doing things we love now. When you reflect back on your 20s and you think, yeah, I'm sure that those were confusing times and you were probably feeling lost and it was probably stressful in some ways, but I do tip my hat to you that you allowed yourself, even if it felt like a struggle, you allowed yourself to keep searching and you didn't settle for something just because it was going to give you a paycheck. You kept looking until you found things that really seemed like they were going to meet your needs. That's the sense I got, based on what I know about the choices that you made along the way. And I think that that's an important point that I want to just bring to the surface here, because I see a lot of people who they'll stop themselves because they've reached a certain threshold and they're not crossing over into that point of, well, how satisfying is this really for me? Yes, it's off certain boxes, but then they leave those other boxes blank. And it sounds like you really kept going. And,
and I would say that can be a guiding principle throughout life, because I find this with a lot of professionals is that, they you get your degree, you start your career, you get to a certain income level, or maybe you got a job with a specific company that you're like, oh my gosh, now I've made it. But then I see people who, for what, in whatever way they've found some sort of success, or they've gotten to a certain point in their life, and then they think, okay, I'm good. I can kind of coast now. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with coasting for a while, because maybe you have other interests and other things in life that you want to pay attention to, or you want to raise a family, or you want to pursue some hobbies, or you want to travel, or, whatever it might be. And, so then maybe that's not coasting, because you're investing your time in other areas of your life. But I find that when sometimes people become stagnant in their career, and that can bleed over into other areas of life, where then maybe they start to have more anxiety, or maybe they get some slight depression, or, and then when you have that anxiety and frustration at work, then that can bleed out into your relationships in life with your loved ones. Because if you're not happy and you're not satisfied at work, then how does that impact the rest of your life? So in general, I just like to see life as this very exciting adventure. And that's constantly this evolutionary process of what's the growth path in front of me right now? What's the skills that I can be working on? What's the next thing for me? What do I want to be working towards? Because we found through research and studies that when you have something out on the horizon to look forward to, that actually can help create a greater sense of happiness and satisfaction in your life. And you can take that across the board, right? It's like if you have a vacation out on the calendar in front of you, that gives you something to look forward to. So we can dissect this across all the different areas of our life, of what do we have in our lives with our families and our friends and our social life, but also in our career. What is it that we have that we're looking forward to, and what's helping us learn and grow and have that edge to where it's keeping us engaged, and it's keeping us, moving forward into something that's like our greater yet to be.
Right. I want to add to what you're saying too, to say that if you happen to be, a working parent, and you have either, young children, or, children coming up through high school, whatever, I think you also want to be mindful that they're watching you. And if they see you either unhappy at work, or for a long period of time, or they see that you're just kind of settling for something, that's going to be their orientation to what it means to go to work every day. And so it's helpful if you take some time to do some reflection. Think about, is this the example you want to set for them? Not that you should just, turn your life upside down just to set the example, but to think about that, that's their orientation to the world of work. And so if you're working only for a paycheck, or if they hear you talking disparagingly about work all the time, that's what they're going to pick up on. And they're going to have a very different view of what that means. So even though many of us as parents might say, my children's happiness is so important, well, if that's true, part of how they're going to learn about happiness is watching how you achieve that for yourself.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. And it goes across the board, right? It's like, it's how satisfied and fulfilled are you in your career? It's also what kind of money are you making, and what kind of lifestyle does that afford for you and the family as well? I think there's many of us that might have examples of like, growing up as a kid, my parents were always scrimping. We were barely getting by.
Right.
So I like to look at it across the board, right? So it's like, are you happy, and are you satisfied, and are you fulfilled? Great. Right. And the money's not always the most important thing.
No.
But sometimes there might be other opportunities out there that are utilizing your exact same skill set, same level of responsibility, same whatever. But maybe if you do it in a different industry or a different organization, maybe you could be making significantly more. And then how does that make an impact on your family's lives as well?
Right. It could ease certain pressures or tensions, or enable you to be able to do different things in your lives, all kinds of things like that. Absolutely. And, I think then there's also, some people are more open to making changes than others, there's all those dynamics. But let's talk about you again. So I'm curious about this startup that really had an impact on you. What kind of a company was that? That seems like that's where a lot of things began for you. So
this was a really cool company. I wish it would have been more successful in the marketplace, because if it would have, I had all kinds of stock options in that organization. And if it would have been successful, I probably would be in a very different place in my life right now. But I'm also very happy with the path that I've traveled. So it was a really cool technology. It was a two-way. Now, mind you, this was in the early 2000s. So think about what kind of technology existed in the early 2000s, right? But this was a two-way audio and video software. Think Zoom, but Zoom for enterprise organizations to deliver customer service. So, and mind you, most of the time we were working off of dial-up internet speeds. And we were able to deliver two-way audio and video software. And so what this would look like is, if you go into a Best Buy and you want to buy a new camera, but you don't know what brand do I want? What kind of lenses do I want? Should I get the camera bag or not the camera bag? Should I get the lens protector? All those kinds of things. So you go into the camera department, but there would actually be a kiosk there. You could push a button and a live person would pop up to support you. And you could have a conversation back and forth with this individual, and then they would have access to all the back end inventory plus marketing materials. And so they could show you, well, do you want to look at, like, here's the Canon model, here's the Sony model, and here's the pros and the cons and the differences between the two. Well, let's figure out which one is the right one for you. What kind of lenses do you want? Do you want this? Do you want this? And they could actually create your order for you right there. You're having this live conversation with an attendant, and then there would be someone in the back that could go and run and get all your products, bring it to the front door. And then, you could have this as a point of sale. So you swipe your card, you meet the live person up at the front door, and you have all your products and off you go.
Wow.
We also were developing this for the home as well. So back then you had to go to the store to buy stuff. This was before Amazon. This was before, anything, right? So we were developing it so that companies could actually have a point of sale in the consumer's home as well. So it was a really, really cool software. And, we had a couple different pilots with some pretty big organizations. And we were looking at retail, hospitality, home improvement, and we actually had a number of different pilots. We got pretty far with it, but we didn't get far enough with it with the funding that we had. And we had a couple rounds of venture capital funding, but there's some changes in leadership, and there were some things that kind of ended up tanking the company, unfortunately. And that is how the cookie crumbled.
Well, that is part of what happens with startups, but it does sound like overall it was, well, first of all, it sounds like a very positive experience overall, huge learning. And you were there for quite some time though, weren't you?
I was there for 5 years.
Yeah. So that's a substantial experience.
Yeah. And what's really cool is kind of, carrying forward with the overall career journey is, during my time there, I was employee number 2. So it was the founder, the CTO, and myself when I got hired. And so I basically got hired as a glorified assistant, but that changed very, very quickly. And, thankfully, like I said, I had a very good working relationship with the founder. And so when we had a need to hire more people, I would basically just talk to the founder or the other leaders. We quickly evolved into having other leadership positions. And so, I would connect with whoever was kind of growing various aspects of the organization. I'd say, hey, this is really interesting. I have a good foundation in this area. I would like to take this project. I would like to move this forward. I know that we need to hire someone new. Why don't we hire someone to backfill my position, and I'll take this project and I'll march this forward. And so I suppose that required a certain amount of boldness in me to do that, but it was a very small organization, and it was, I knew a lot of the people, so it was fairly easy to do that. And so I quickly moved into basically becoming a product manager, and I, helped build that product, build the technology, was doing user research and writing requirements and working with the technical team to get everything built out. And so I did that. And then also was running usability studies. We were bringing in people and testing the product and seeing like, okay, do people understand how to use this button? And should we change it to a different color? Should it be in a different part of the screen? And all that stuff. It was really fun, really super fun.
Yeah.
But I also started to pay attention to the team dynamics and how the culture of that organization shifted as we grew, because we started to grow very quickly because we were getting funding, first angel funding, and then we got venture capital funding. And I was employee number 2, and we grew it. By the time that I left, we had it might have been 25, 30 people. So not huge, but a pretty, that was pretty significant growth.
Right.
But I noticed that, as we grew and we started to create new leadership positions, how the culture and the team dynamics shifted over time. And that got me really interested in organization development and leadership. And so at some point in time, I made the decision to go back to school, and I got a master's in leadership and organization development. And I started to have these ideas that maybe I would become more of a consultant and work with organizations to help them create the kind of culture and work environment that is supportive of the team and can help an organization really grow and thrive. And so I got this master's degree. And then I thought, okay, now I've got this fancy degree. Companies like consulting firms, they're just going to be lining up to hire me. And unfortunately, that was not the case. And so this was, I was already growing my career, but I also was starting to pay attention to, well, as a professional, what do you really need to do to promote and position yourself in the marketplace so that employers can see you in the way that you need to be seen to land the kind of job that you want to have?
Right.
And so I was trying to get hired by some consulting firms, and I did not have success with that. And then I had more student loans that I had to pay off. And so I basically got a job doing what I had previously been doing, although I shifted it a little bit. And I was then doing usability engineering and, running more user studies. So I was designing studies, testing different products with, consumers or representative of the consumer base, and then making recommendations to, by this time I was working with large organizations, Fortune 500 companies, and saying like, hey, did you know that if you change this button from an orange, a blue button to an orange button, that'll make you several more $1 million per year.
Wow.
So that was a really fun job as well.
Yeah.
And then I was working in a very big company by this point in time, and I still had this interest in consulting. And I'd gotten my master's degree by this point in time. So I started going around to the directors and VPs inside the organization. I was just networking and trying to increase my influence internally. And so I was having conversations with higher level leaders and was saying, hey, just to let you know, I have this degree and I'm looking to gain some experience in this area. So if you ever have a need to do some team building, or, if there's any changes happening in your organization, I'd be happy to support you. And, again, that was a very bold move.
Yeah. And we're kind of stepping outside your lane a little bit there.
Totally.
Right? You didn't feel like you were because you had this master's, but within the constructs of the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, was there did you think about going to human resources and offering this under their?
Well, at this particular organization I was working in, HR was almost non-existent.
Oh, really?
So there was no support there was no support. HR was basically for you to get your benefits. And,
so it was and
if you had like a major complaint about something, then maybe they would make themselves available, but
it had nothing to do with all that other stuff.
Yeah. Right.
Interesting. Okay.
So what happened was, I talked to all these directors and VPs, and then lo and behold, this organization decided to merge all of their legacy companies together. So they had gone through this huge, acquisition period where they had acquired all these different organizations, but they were letting each organization run themselves independent of one another. And then at a certain point in time, they're like, okay, we're going to merge all of these different organizations together. So I had a director who caught me in the hallway one day, and he pulled me into a conference room. He said, "Hey, you know that thing that you said that you could support me with? Like, I need your help." And so I was like, "Okay, cool. Yeah. What can I do? How can I support you?" And he said, "Well, there's 4 legacy organizations. We're all merging together. I got word from, headquarters that I'm going to be leading there's 4 creative services teams that were all going to get merged into one. And his team was going to quadruple basically overnight."
Wow.
So he said, "Well, why don't you put something together tonight? Let's have a conversation tomorrow, and then we'll see where to go from there." So I go home, I pour through all of my materials from grad school, put together this PowerPoint presentation, brought it back to him the next day. We'd organized a meeting and basically regurgitated everything that I had learned, over the course of my master's degree. And he was like, "This is great. This is great. Okay, tomorrow I want you to present this to my leadership team." I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this thing is moving forward. So
be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. So that's how I got my start in consulting. And it ended up being a huge project because there was these 4 teams that we had to figure out, how could we have one org chart for all of these teams? And there was a duplication in different roles. So we had to define, okay, what was each person, like what was each manager's job? What did their team support? What technologies did they use? What was their structure? What were their processes? And then how could we create this one central unified vision and operating structure for everybody to operate from? And then how do we actually facilitate that change so that everybody understood, what are we moving towards? How are things going to change? How might their jobs change in the process? There did end up being some layoffs as part of that process, which was very unfortunate. And it was a really hard thing for everyone to go through, but that was part of the process as well. And then we had to get everybody trained on the new structure, get everybody, settled into their new roles, and also, do this in this people-centered, oriented way so that, oftentimes when legacy companies come together like that, when there's a large reorg or a merger, there tends to be this us versus them mentality. And so how do you get a centralized team all working and operating together so they actually feel like a unified team, and, they're not terrified that they're going to lose their job or terrified that their job is going to change beyond recognition of what they had been doing, and are they going to like what they're doing moving forward in the future? So it was a really, really big project. But that really helped me gain some initial experience. And again, here's one of those situations in my career. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I figured it out as I move forward. Yeah. Right. And so just for everybody listening, if you're scared about taking on something new, or you want to raise your hand for something new, and you want to grow your skills, in my experience, if you just take the first step forward and you move in that direction, and you recognize that you're probably not going to be doing it alone. Right. Even if people are looking for you to guide or lead the way, you're probably still going to have support in the process. And you can go find mentors and sponsors and guides who are going to help you through this journey. But keep taking those steps forward. Keep trying something new. Treat it like an adventure. Move into something new and different. Take on those stretch roles. And, go after your dreams. Go after what you really want to be doing, because that was another big point in time that helped put my career on the map. And from that, I actually ended up doing a couple different things before I actually got into consulting, but I did eventually get into consulting, and I worked for some great consulting firms, and I got to do what I actually wanted to do. And then I moved on from there, and now I'm doing something totally different now too.
Yeah. So shall we go there?
Sure. Let's do it.
Yeah. Because, I know you've done a number of different things over the years, but I think that you're making an excellent point about how, how you've stepped into a number of different things with some thoughtfulness too, though. I think sometimes when people think about stepping into something where maybe they're not feeling totally sure of themselves, they think that it's an all or nothing kind of thing. And I like what you just said about it, that, you go into it, but you're not really going into it completely alone. And although this last scenario you just described, you kind of took the initiative alone on your own, but you did have this master's degree. It wasn't like you were just offering to help people and you had no idea what you were doing. You had a master's degree behind you, and you had seen a need for something, and it was something you really wanted to do. So, and yet I'm sure it was still, a little nerve-wracking at the same time. But I love that story. I just love it. So at some point though, you decided to move into the coaching space, the coaching and consulting space, because that's where you are now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So when was that? When did you make that transition?
Well, you know what? When I look back on it, I was kind of doing it all along.
Yeah.
And so, I do have a business, a full-time business doing this now, and I support clients, and that's what I do day in, day out. But when I look back on my career, I was pretty effective at making these pretty big career transitions myself. And so when I would make one of those transitions, I had friends and family, people that were close to me that were saying, hey, wait a second. Like, how did you accomplish that in your career?
Yeah.
And some people were asking me, can you help me do the same thing for myself? So at first it just started purely out of my own interests and my own passions. And, I've always been very interested in career growth and advancement. And so, I did that for myself, but I've always wanted to support other professionals in doing it as well. So at first it's just kind of born out of curiosity and passion on the side. And I was helping people with their resumes and preparing for interviews and talking about salary negotiation. And then, it was friends and family. And then I started getting referrals from their friends and their family. And then it just kind of built and grew over time. Yeah. And then at a certain point in time, I said, hey, I started to develop structure and process and guidelines and what people should be looking at. And so then I thought, okay, well, I think I have a business here. Maybe I should start, actually working with people in an official capacity and charging for this. And so then it became a part-time business on top of a full-time job. And I did that very successfully for a number of years while I was doing all these other career transformations on my own. And then about 6 years ago, I came to a crossroads in my consulting career. And I just decided Dynamo Careers was a big enough business at that point in time. And I was also had this full-time, very demanding consulting job. And so I was like, oh my gosh, it's like, I got 2 full-time jobs right now. And I have no life outside of this. So, I thought long and hard, and I had this very, soul searching reflection process for myself of well, what is it that I really enjoy? What gives me that sense of satisfaction and fulfillment in my life? And even in my consulting, what I realized that I really liked was the executive coaching, the aspect of, working with executives and helping them identify what do they want to do with their teams and how can they be a better leader. And then in my coaching business, it was helping people understand what's important to them in their career and where do they want to go in their career and how can they promote and position themselves better and how can they, show up as more of a leader on their own, even if they're not pursuing a leadership or management position. How can they be a leader of their own career?
Right. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I had this big decision point, and I said, you know what, this is what fulfills me. And so I'm going to make a leap, and I'm really going to invest my time and energy into what I really love and what gives me joy and satisfaction and fulfillment in my life. And And that's how I got to where I am at this point in time in my career today.
So would you say then that it basically, so you stopped working for somebody else, so to speak, really, took what you were already doing on your own and expanded on that? Or are there things that you added to that?
When I got started with my coaching business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been an evolutionary process in working with clients and figuring out, what do people really need? How can I help people overcome the challenges that they're currently experiencing, but also helping them to see the bigger picture of, what is it that they really want and what do they need? And how do we kind of fit all of those things together? And so it's been an evolutionary process of, defining a structure of what really works for clients in an effective and efficient way. So I've really wanted to create a process. I lead clients through a very specific process to help them first understand what is it that they should even be focused on in their career, and what's going to be serving for them in both their short and long-term career. So I look at things very holistically and put together a career roadmap. Then we get into the tactical components of, okay, what should your resume and your LinkedIn profile say in a way that's really going to promote you in the way that you need to be seen? And then how do we approach the job search process in a way that's going to work for you? So you're not just out there applying for hundreds and hundreds of jobs. Let's have a very targeted, efficient, focused job search that's going to actually produce the results of what you're looking for. And then when you get into the interviews, are you saying things in a very clear and succinct way? Are you presenting yourself in the way that they need to see you? And then once you start getting offers coming in, how do you negotiate those so that that's going to be serving of you as well? And are you, overall, are you focused on the right level, the right title, the right industry, the right organization? And then, are you targeting the right pay range of what you should be receiving for that role and those responsibilities, so that without a doubt that you're being paid market rate or above market rate for the role that you're pursuing.
Right. So I want to also, this is very helpful. Thank you. I want to make sure that our listeners know that you are offering them an assessment that they can take themselves. And that they can get at your website at dynamocareers.com/assessment. Tell us a little bit about that assessment.
Yes, absolutely. So this is a free assessment, absolutely free. And it's called, Does Your Work Work for You? And what this will do, it's a quick 5-minute assessment. It's going to go through and ask you a range of questions to understand, are you on track with your career goals? Is it in alignment with your purpose and your passion? How fulfilling is, when we look at organizational culture and team environment, how fulfilled are you by that? Or what should you be looking for? And so overall, it's an overall evaluation of your career at this point in time, right now. And also, figuring out, okay, what's the gap between where are you at right now and what would you like to have? What's the gap? And then in the end, when you get your results, it'll, tell you where you are right now and what are some simple but highly effective action steps that you can be taking to progress your career, to advance your career and move forward into something that's going to be more fulfilling and more rewarding for you. And, ultimately, of course, it's a little bit of an add-on to this. Ultimately, we want to find something that's also going to be in the right pay range for you so that, you're making the compensation that can help you have the kind of lifestyle that you want to have as well.
Right. So everything you do really has that holistic feel to it. It really does. You really take your clients from the beginning to the end piece. It really does. It's very developmental. That's great. That's wonderful. So, and in terms of people finding you, they can find you through your website at dynamocareers.com. Is there any other place that's good for them to find you?
Sure, absolutely. I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
You can find me there. My name is Sonja Price. and it's Sonja
All right.
Price.
Great.
And I'd love, send me a message. I love connecting with folks. So find me, connect with me, send me a message.
Yes.
And I'd love to support you if I can.
Great. And I want to finish up with just one question. And that is, if you had to give somebody one piece of advice, if they were preparing to make a transition or they're thinking about what's next for them, what would be one key piece of advice you might give them as they're embarking on a transition?
One piece of advice.
Well, I know there's many pieces.
Yes, there's many pieces, but here's how I like to encourage people to look at your career is to think like a consultant and act like a marketer. So think about if you were an objective third party and you were coming to yourself and you were trying to consult or coach with yourself, and you're asking yourself, okay, like think about a business project or something that you've worked on and you are coming in as a consultant. What are the right types of questions that you would ask that team or that leader or an individual or yourself? Think like a consultant. You come in, you're there to solve a problem. So what are the problems or the challenges that currently exist in your career? How can you approach that like a consultant so you can help solve and move beyond those problems? But then act like a marketer. So if you actually want to make that transition in your career, how can you promote and position yourself in a way so that whatever organization may eventually hire you, they need to see you as someone who can help solve their problems. So if you think like a consultant, you're going to be solving your own problems by helping you identify a career that's a better fit for you. But also when you reach out and engage with organizations who could potentially hire you, think like a consultant about that particular role and how can you help them solve their problems? That's going to give you the clues in knowing how to market and position yourself so that they see you as the number one candidate for that role and that there's no other options. There's no other choice. Like you are the one that they want to hire and they're going to extend the offer to you and be very happy and satisfied when you're on their team working with them.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, I think about something like that around what kind of an impact do you want to have? What kinds of problems do you want to be solving? Mm-hmm. I think sometimes people think about other things, and I like that. That's great. Well, Sonja, thank you so much for being here today. This has been great. Everything will be in the show notes. And thank you so much for the free gift you're giving the audience. That'll be really informative. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tammy. This has been such a great conversation. Super fun to be on your show. And I always love having these conversations. So thanks for the opportunity.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Sonja Price. It was so interesting to speak with her, to learn about her background and professional transitions. What's your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 176. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my new book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon Worldwide, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Sonja, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd really appreciate reading your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.